So first question, may I know if you have any advice for us to practice when we are not well? Should I go and rest when I feel the tiredness and sleepiness during my meditation when I'm not well? I try to wake myself up, but I'm defeated by the defilements of the sick body. Someday I try to go to take a nap and try to sit again. It works. However, in the event, if the sickness or tiredness is prolonged, how should I continue to strive and continue to meditate?
Good question. One thing you said was that the defilements of the body doesn't really have defilements. The body is made up of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And sickness and injury is basically those elements are out of sync in one way or another. But they're just elements. They're not a person, a being. They're just the four elements. The defilements are in the mind. And it's our wrong thinking, our wrong view, micchaditthi, that grasps the body and the symptoms of the body, say tiredness, illness, injury, as self, that is the problem. That's the defilements, greed, anger, delusion, but they're in the mind. And thereby we have a chance to actually detach from even the symptoms of illness, or at least make that as a goal, because the Buddha and Ajahn Chah and all the teachers have done that. So it obviously can be done, but it takes great effort and practice, and we have to be realistic. And if we're still new to the practice, well, yes, sickness, illness will be a big challenge, and we have to adjust our effort and our practice to deal with this challenge. You have to adjust your expectations. So, don't expect to be doing many hours of sitting and walking meditation and getting into deep states of samadhi when you're ill. But you can practice mindfulness as long as you're awake when you're ill. You can practice mindfulness and reflect on the symptoms that you're experiencing. If you're lying down, tired, in pain, weak, get to know that. Oh, I'm weak, I'm tired, it feels like this is what it's like. Make your body or the vedana, the feelings, the basis for your mindfulness practice. Satipatthana, four foundations of mindfulness, is directed to body, feelings, mind, and then the Dhammas, the Four Noble Truths, how suffering arises, how attachment arises, how attachment can be abandoned. You can still practice, but you're adjusting your efforts. So yes, you may rest much more than when you're feeling normal, and just accept that. Okay, I need to sleep more. You may have fuzzy states of mind. You're weak, so there are times when you're kind of daydreaming more or fuzzy, not clear. Well, work with that. Do your best to try and be as mindful as you can through those states. Observe yourself in those states. What's going on? How is your body? How is your mind when you're feeling very weak, very tired? Get to know yourself. You don't have to push yourself and make yourself physically worse or more ill, but just use the situation the best you can to establish mindfulness and contemplate these three characteristics: the changing conditions of body and mind, feelings, thoughts, the suffering of it all, of course, what we call the dukkha laksana, and then the way your mind creates a self out of this experience of being ill. So, I am ill. The most extreme will be you have to tell everyone you meet, I am ill. I need your sympathy. We do that, don't we? When we're ill, we are looking for lots of attention, distractions, people around. We want them to sympathize with us, do things for us, treat us nicely. When you're ill, unless you're so weak that you can't meet anyone, but quite often when you're ill, you want attention. You want people to attend to you, and if they ignore you, you get annoyed. So watch that. Watch how you get annoyed when you're ignored or when people haven't got time for you. Watch the desire for comfort and distraction because your body is feeling terrible. These are all things you can learn from and be mindful of. And people who do take up illness as a place of practice, they adjust, of course, they rest more, and they have to, make allowances for posture and effort and so on. But people who take up their illness as a basis for practice, they often become very wise and peaceful people, because they're really seeing the dukkha, the suffering of a human body. They're seeing the impermanence of the body, and they're learning to let go of all their expectations. So their mind often is quite peaceful, because they're using their illness and that situation to learn, to understand more deeply the way things are. What did the Buddha say? He said, when we're healthy, we get intoxicated with our good health. We have strength, we have vitality, we can do things, so we forget the Dhamma. We throw the Dhamma out of the window, and we're going here, going there, wasting a lot of time with all kinds of foolish pursuits, getting attached to things, getting upset. When you're ill, you let go of many things quite naturally. You don't bother getting too angry about things because you're so weak. What's the point of getting angry about all that stuff? It doesn't matter anymore. You stop seeking out a lot of, unnecessary pleasure seeking, trying to, just get all kinds of pleasurable experiences. You drop a lot of that because you realize it doesn't matter anymore. It's not going to change anything. So you drop it. So if you take up the Dhamma at that time, maybe it's a time you really can progress in your Dhamma practice. But you have to manage your situation. Of course, rest enough, be careful, don't push yourself too much, but reflect on things, establish mindfulness, reflect on the three characteristics, and you may even get enlightened while you're ill.
Sadhu, Lompo. Next question. Ajahn Chah said that with proper practice, one can manage to get stream entry in 5 years. Could you let me know what is the proper practice?
One aspect of the proper practice is you know yourself. But of course, in the beginning, we have to ask teachers, and we have doubts, we ask questions, of course. But that's part of the practice, is bringing it in until you see where you're on the path and where you're straying off the path. Because a Sotapanna knows very well, a stream enterer knows very well what is the path and what is not. So they practice properly. It's part of the definition of a Sotapanna. So you're learning that, what is the path. In essence, it's Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the 8 factors of the Noble Path. Particularly, because there's so many different aspects of the teachings that we could talk about, and in different situations, different people, there's a lot you could talk about. We often summarize. So I often summarize. I say, well, be mindful, because in essence, that's what you're aiming for, to maintain mindfulness and then reflect, to cultivate right view towards your experience, to see the body, feelings, memories, thought formations, and consciousness as impermanent, as dukkha, as not self. Getting that really clearly established, because one who sees impermanence sees the Buddha. Where does your a Sotapanna, a stream enterer, has unwavering, unshakable faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha? Where does that come from? Well, seeing the Dhamma means you're seeing and understanding what the Buddha was talking about. So then you have unshakable faith in the Buddha because you realize he was talking the truth. So where does that come from? Well, keep establishing mindfulness and seeing the impermanence in your 5 khandhas, and sooner or later you have your breakthrough. And Luang Por Chah was giving a very sort of, you might say it's a generalization, but it's a very skillful generalization. 5 years, yep, that's a good period of time, because most people do it, 5 minutes, and then they're off to do something else. So 5 years is giving you a realistic kind of time frame to work with. And probably what I say is, if you reach 5 years, maybe you're a Sotapanna, maybe not. But if you've been sincerely practicing for 5 years, You're not going to quit then. You're going to carry on for the rest of your life, however much time you've got. So that's why it works as a generalization. Because the whole point is you're streamlining your whole behavior of body, speech, and mind, your whole attitude, your whole view of the world into the path of the Noble Eightfold Path, and straying from it less and less. And this is, how we define a Sotapanna. You're no longer reborn in the lower realms, no longer attaching to those unwholesome ways of behavior. So 5 years, yep, that sounds a reasonable length of time to me.
Sadhu, Lumpo. Next question. Dear Ajahn, how do I know if I'm aware of my negative feeling, or am I just suppressing that feeling?
Well, you know. That's the whole point. You know that you're experiencing a negative feeling. Not sure what a negative feeling is. I assume you mean a negative emotion that has an unpleasant feeling with it, because it could be a negative thought, and negative thoughts will be accompanied by unpleasant feeling of one sort or another. So you have to be mindful enough to see this arise and pass away, and not get lost in it, not attached to it, not let it stimulate craving and attachment that gets you lost again and caught into proliferation. This is why you need the mindfulness. This is why you need to make your mind firm in mindfulness to really see clearly what's going on. When you're mindful from moment to moment, you start to relax physically and mentally, then you can cope mentally with seeing and knowing unpleasant memories, unpleasant thoughts, painful feelings, and you can see them as just what they are without grasping at them and getting lost in the proliferation that forms around them. So, experiment with this. When you're more mindful of the breath, then you can notice painful feelings arising into your consciousness, but you just notice them arising and passing away without getting caught into aversion or negativity based around those painful physical feelings, or unpleasant memories come up, but you just see them for what they are. Oh, that's an unpleasant memory, yes, but you're mindful enough to see it and then let it go. That's what defines the whole thing. Your aim is to be mindful enough, calm enough, steady enough to see things arising and passing away without grasping at them and creating a self out of them, without seeing them as me, mine, myself, getting caught up in them. That's your aim. And sometimes you'll be able to do it. And when you can do it, remember that and say, oh, I could do it. That really unpleasant thought about that time I had an argument with someone, or that thing that I really detest, it came up in my mind. I thought about it, but I just saw it as a thought, came up, I let it go, finished, gone. I did it. And if you did it once, you can do it again. Little by little, or fast. If you're practicing a lot, maybe very fast and very quickly, you learn from your experience, and you see a thought as just a thought, feelings just feelings, memories just memories. But then sometimes we don't. Sometimes we fail again, and something is triggered, and we're back with disappointment, despair, anguish, sadness, loneliness, all the sort of negative stuff comes back, and the mindfulness has slipped, isn't it? Because we're not yet perfectly mindful. But if you keep at it, you'll get better at it. So just keep going.
Sadhu, Lumpo. Does anyone have any further questions or comments? If you do, then please type your question in the chat box or raise your digital hand. Next question. What is a Gotrabu? Is it linked with the first of the 8 persons with the first Magga, or can a Gotrabu still regress?
Yes, this term from the Pali, I don't know what they're translating it as these days, but I've always remembered it as change of lineage, which sounds very grand, doesn't it? And it is grand, but change of lineage is from Patujana to Arya, isn't it? We call an Arya a noble one, different from a Patujana, unenlightened person. So it's preceding the arising of Sodapati Maggapala. So it's Gotarabu is this change where Ajahn Chah used to talk about it. You know, you got 1 foot on this side of the stream and 1 foot on the other. You haven't fully crossed, but you're not going back either. So probably, you know, it's just a word we use, but probably you could say it's the mind is moving toward the path factors are coming up in the mind. It's moving towards the establishment of the path factors, the 8 factors of the path, the arising of the Dhamma I. You could call it, you know, that moment preceding the path where everything's coming together. You're not yet an Arya Pugala, but you're just about to be or just close to being. And there's some controversy over this discussion. You know, some people say, well, it's just literally one moment. The Abhidhamma tends to teach it that way. It's just one moment. And then Ajahn Chah used to talk about the Kotarabu Pugala. There's a person who's constantly experiencing this kind of 1 foot on this side of the stream, 1 foot on that, kind of half in, half out, almost there, but not quite. So a little bit of regression and then back in, you know, and that seems a very realistic description of the practice, isn't it? You know, there's times when everything gels, comes together. Sila is good, sati, mindfulness is good, samadhi is there, wisdom is seeing anicca, dukkha, anatta clearly, probably very close to Maggapala arising. And then things, maybe there's a little bit of slipping back, you know, nothing too serious perhaps. It's not like slipping back and sort of doing terribly unskillful, unwholesome things, but it's not quite gelling. Maybe the mindfulness and the samadhi is not quite strong enough. We say that bharami is not quite there. So there's a little bit of slipping back. The whole point about the Arya Pugalas, the noble ones, is there's no more slipping back. There's only progress towards Nibbana. They've had a glimpse of Nibbana and are only progressing towards it. Whereas the unenlightened person can always slip back and maybe, you know, be reborn in the lower realms. But Gotarabu is just that. It's the change. It's the, if you're going, you know, towards a motorway, you're up here on an ordinary road and you see the motorway down there. And then there's what we call a slip road or the ramp going to the motorway. So it's the ramp. You're just getting to the motorway, so you're most likely to get to the motorway, but you're not on it yet. You see the sign saying all the rules that apply to the drivers on the motorway. So you know what you're getting into, you know what's happening, but you're not quite there yet.
Sadhu, Lompo. Are there any more further questions or comments? If not, then that will bring us to the end of the session. So there is one last question here. We just arrived. Dear Ajahn, should I do reflection of my actions and mind during meditation?
There's no absolute answer to this. If you're to give a general answer, I'd say no. I'd say, number one, your aim is to strengthen your mindfulness on your object. That's always your starting point. So the breath, for example, or the body, for example, focusing mindfulness on your object as much as possible, make your mindfulness as strong as possible. But we all know in the course of practicing meditation, there are times when you can't do that very well, very successfully. And quite possibly it's because different actions and things you're being involved with are coming up very strongly in your mind. You're remembering stuff, or there's unfinished business that you want to, You just have to think about. So occasionally, the right thing to do maybe is to actually work it through, reflect on what's going on. Why am I so attached to this? What's happened? Maybe learning from mistakes or unskillful behavior that's happened in the past and seeing how it's coming up, disturbing you. Sometimes it may be correct to work through that until you've understood it and you can let go. But your aim is to let go, isn't it? It's not to endlessly analyze your behavior and activities and past actions. That's only a step towards bringing the mind to mindfulness of your object. So, if it's necessary, you may have to take that approach sometimes. But another way to do it is also just have that kind of reflection, not when you're doing your formal meditation of sitting and walking, but when you're just doing other activities. Reflect on what you've said and done. You can do that anytime. You don't have to do it in your meditation if you're talking about formal meditation here. Maybe that time you really practice letting go of everything. And at other times, when you're walking along the street, driving your car, going here, going there, doing different ordinary activities, eating your food, reflect on things, sure. That's very much a part of daily practice, is reflecting on our actions, what was right and good, what worked, what was conducive to happiness, what was not good, what was conducive to suffering, what was the wrong thing to say and do, what led to more stress and suffering for me, for others. There are plenty of times in the day when you can do that reflection, and there's times when you probably shouldn't be doing that reflection. You should just be focusing on your meditation object and making your sati, your mindfulness, and your samadhi stronger and stronger. And that's another part of the practice, is learning the right time, the right place. You could say another part of proper practice. When is it important to reflect on things? And when is it time to drop that and just focus mindfulness on a single object, perhaps? So there's no one simple answer to this. I think it comes through experience.
Sadhu, Lompo. Next question. Dear Ajahn, can you please describe mental defilements in our consciousness? What was the Pali term you used? Thank you.
Kilesa. Well, I think I mentioned in the talk, anusaya kilesa. It's like kilesa that are underlying. Sometimes people say in your subconscious, but they're just kind of lying down there, quiet, not yet disturbed, but they can pop up, particularly when you're meditating and you're not talking to anyone, you're not doing anything other than just sitting there or walking back and forth quietly, not bothering the world. And you just remember something, or something pops into your mind. And it's like, where did this come from? And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. So we call that anusaya kilesa. It's just talking about kilesas, which are all those mental states rooted in greed, anger, and delusion, but they have many manifestations, jealousy, fear, stubbornness, dullness, conceit, arrogance, and so on. They come up in many ways, but it's just one way of looking at them, seeing them as how they're just sitting there waiting for the right trigger, the right moment, and then they come up. That's one way of looking at kilesas. Another one is to look at them as, we call them asavas. So it's fermentations or outflows, and they're kind of bubbling up and coming out in and often coming out, in speech and action, but also your view, the way you view the world. Another way of looking at kilesa defilements is as fetters, sangyojana. So there's many ways, different terms that the Buddha used for describing mental defilements, and sometimes it's just to help you in your practice, and just to look at them from different angles, to see them from different functions in the practice, how they obstruct you. Like probably the one that you might use most often is hindrances, mental hindrances. they're all kilesas. They're exactly the same things, but just they're the things that are manifesting as you're meditating all the time. You'll be seeing hindrances, won't you? So it's just different words the Buddha used on different occasions, but describing much the same things.
Sadhu, Lumpo. There are no more further questions, Lumpo. So that brings us to the end of our Zoom session.
Very nice to talk to you, and see you again next time.